All right, so yesterday we did our microscopy lab where we looked at some microscopic organisms and we kind of learned how to use the microscope, gained some experience with it. So a reminder that that lab report is due on Monday. Okay? If you're wanting some help or some pointers or tips or something, make sure you pop in to see me, okay, before Monday. What we're going to move on to today is going to start looking at some of the functions of cells, right? Because one of the points of the cell theory is that cells do what? Carry out the basic functions, yeah, okay? So we're going to be looking at some of those basic functions, especially related to acquiring and metabolizing energy, okay? So what we're going to be looking at are plants versus animal cells today, why there are differences and why there are similarities, okay? And then we're going to label a diagram of the cell, which will mean that you can expect Thursday's quiz to contain some stuff about cell theory and some stuff about what parts of the cell are what. Not what they do, because we probably won't get into that too much today, but at least being able to identify some parts of the cell. Okay, so we need to know and understand how plant and animal cells are different, okay? Understand why those differences are present and necessary, and be able to label plant and animal cells. All right. How do animals get their energy? Yeah, through eating. Through consuming organic material, usually in the form of other organisms. Okay? I mean, even a cow is a predator. I mean, if you're a blade of grass, seeing a cow coming, well, not that they're conscious, but okay, they're still hunting stuff. They're eating plants. They're eating other organisms. Okay? So the source of energy for animals is the organic material of other organisms, be they plant or animal or both. Where do plants get their energy from? Photosynthesis. Okay. Where do fungi get their energy from? Could be in the soil, but I mean there's going to be some of this stuff in the soil. But what do fungi eat? Not too many are going to grow on bacteria because bacteria are very small, right? They're smaller than the fungi themselves. Okay, this is a tricky one because there's a lot of actual correct answers. Okay, fungi can be decomposers, which means they feed on the organic material from dead organisms, be they plant or animal. All right, you know, if you leave a loaf of bread in the pantry and don't eat it, it gets furry. Okay, that's fungi growing on the organic material that is the bread. Okay, or you leave potatoes for too long, they start to get soft and slimy. And again, it's a fungus that grows in them. Okay, and there are some fungi that are parasitic. Okay, the same fungus that causes athlete's foot can also grow on your scalp. How many of you really want to dig your fingernails into your scalp right now? Now that I see it. Okay, but it's true. Okay, and it's a fungus, but it's a parasitic fungus. Right? And it actually eats you. That's why it's itchy. Okay? It is actually digesting you in exactly the same chemical process that you digest food in your stomach. Right? So a parasitic fungus like athlete's foot, instead of digesting the food inside of its body, digests the food outside. Okay? So a fungus, all fungus do this. They grow things called hyphae. They look like roots, but they're not roots. Okay? They're their feeding apparatus. So these hyphae grow into the food source, your foot. Okay? And they secrete digestive enzymes, just like are in your stomach, and they digest your cells, and then they absorb the digested material and use it for fuel. Okay? And that's why it's itchy. Okay? And it's the same for the fungus that grows on bread or oranges or anything else. Okay? They produce these things. Okay? And they consume them that way. Right? But what all three have in common, and what bacteria and the amoeba and the paramecium and the euglena that we looked at yesterday, what they all have in common is they all use the same chemical for fuel. It's just about how they get it that's different. Okay? That fuel is glucose. Okay, and glucose is C6H12O6. Okay, that's glucose. Every one of these organisms, plants, animals, fungi, protists, that would be the amoebas and paramecium, okay, bacteria, all of them use this reaction, to fuel themselves. What kind of reaction is that?
Combustion.
It's a combustion reaction, okay? So we often say, oh, I gotta burn some calories, right? Go and lose some weight, I gotta burn some calories. Well, obviously there's no like little fires going on in your cell, okay? But it's still a process like a combustion reaction where this fuel, glucose, is broken up, okay? And when the bonds between these molecules are broken, the energy is released, okay? So all of these organisms use glucose as their fuel for what we call cellular respiration, okay? That's what this is. Okay? So basically any living organism on Earth, with the exception of a very, very select few, okay, use this process to get their energy. Okay? Those select few would be some of the very strange organisms that live near volcanic vents on the ocean floor. Their reaction is slightly different, okay, but that's a very small percentage. Just about every organism uses this. So it's every organism has to have some way to get glucose. For animals, we consume other organisms for food, and then we have chemical digestion that essentially breaks stuff down and makes it into glucose. All right. Some foods are much easier to turn into glucose than others. What would be the easiest thing that we eat that could turn into glucose? Thinking of like food group. Actually, salads are actually a harder one. Carbohydrates, yeah. Okay. What's the first thing if you're trying to lose weight? What's the first thing you try and cut out of your diet? Carbs, right? Carbs, because carbs are most easily changed into glucose. All right, because they are most closely resembling glucose already. Glucose is a carbohydrate. Okay, sugar is a carbohydrate, right? And glucose is a type of sugar. So carbohydrates are the ones that are most easily turned into food energy. Okay, things like vegetables. Okay, they don't have a lot of carbohydrates in them, at least not that we can access. Okay, as humans, our digestive system is not able to digest cellulose fiber, which is what salad and things like leafy vegetables and stuff are made out of. So we have a harder time getting any food energy out of that. Now, if you're a cow and all you eat is grass, you actually have the ability to turn that stuff into carbohydrates, and that's where they get their food energy from. Okay, but for us, eating that kind of stuff doesn't do a lot in terms of energy. Doesn't mean it doesn't have good nutritional value. It's got lots of fiber in it. Okay, what's fiber good for? It helps you poop. Okay, it actually cleans out your digestive tract, and it cleans it out because we can't digest it. All right. I don't mean to gross anybody out here, but think of corn. Okay? Corn comes out of you pretty much the way it went in. Okay? And that's because we can't digest the outer kind of kernel part, okay, of the corn because it's made of cellulose and we don't have any digestive enzymes that can break that down. Pigs and cows and other herbivores, no problem, they can break that down, okay? And they will, and they'll get food energy out of it. We can't. But it's good for us because as it goes through, it also collects stuff that could be otherwise stuck to the inside of our intestines, and that's bad. Okay, so we want that stuff to get cleaned up, right? And so that's the benefit we get out of that. What about meat? How easily does meat turn into carbohydrate? Actually, very difficult. Okay, it's why a lot of diets, like they call them now, the paleo diet and any of these ones that are basically like focused just on protein. Okay, the reason they want you to focus on protein is your body actually has to use energy to turn protein into carbohydrates. Okay, and so reaction, and your body has to work harder to do it, so you don't get as many calories out of the same amount of carbohydrates and protein. Okay? Protein is harder for your body to convert. Okay? So if you eat lots and lots of lean protein, okay, that's a way to kind of pull calories out of your diet. Right? Fats, on the other hand, are very easily converted into carbohydrates. Okay? And so if we're using those, then we're eating lots of those, which in a North American diet we typically do. Okay? Lots of fats are going to end up being calories later. Okay? They're going to end up being carbohydrates. They're also easily converted because that's what we use in our bodies to store energy. Okay? If we've consumed excess energy, it gets stored as fat. The body doesn't want to waste it, so it just stores it. Okay? It stores it as fat, and then it can convert it later, okay, back into carbohydrates and energy if you have a deficit. That making sense? Okay. So all organisms have to get to this reaction. Animals and fungi and most protists, okay, they would use the consumption of other organisms and then converting that fuel into glucose. How do plants get their energy? From the sun. Okay, so they use this reaction. It's kind of like looking in a mirror, isn't it? Right? It's just this reaction backwards. Okay? That's the carbon cycle. You guys remember that from junior high science? Yeah, the water cycle, nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle. This is the carbon cycle. Okay? And it's how all of that energy continues to be cycled through. Okay? We use, or all organisms use glucose and oxygen to produce carbon dioxide and water, which ends up being the raw materials for photosynthesis. Okay? And so then the plants can produce their own glucose and oxygen as a byproduct, and either they're using their own glucose or other organisms are consuming them and using their glucose. Okay? Either way, that just keeps cycling back and forth. Right? Okay. So, modes of nutrition. Those three words are going to be important because they are the reason why plants and animal cells are different. Okay, they're also why the cells of a fungus are different from animal cells and different from plant cells and so on. Okay, the way they get their glucose is different, and so their cells are adapted to acquire the energy that they need. Okay? So the different modes of nutrition is why that occurs. So obviously we got, predators eating other animals. Okay, we got plants that are carrying out photosynthesis. Either way, we're getting to glucose somehow. But if you are an organism that carries out photosynthesis, then you probably don't need to do one of the things that these organisms have to do. Okay? If you're a photosynthetic organism, you don't have to digest food. If you're an animal, you don't have to carry out photosynthesis. Okay? And so what happens is your cells have to have the organelles that are capable of getting you what you need. So in a plant cell, you've got to have chloroplasts to carry out photosynthesis. Okay? If you're an animal, you've got to have lysosomes, which are like the stomach of the cell, and they contain digestive enzymes and break down food. Right? A plant doesn't need those. It doesn't consume food. Okay? Everyone following me there? Right? Now, the other thing that can be different is, if you're an animal, you likely have to be able to move because you have to catch your food. Even if it's a blade of grass, you still have to catch it. Okay? Because once you eat that one, you have to go over to the next one. You have to be able to move to acquire food. That means your cells have to be flexible, okay, and have ways to help you move around. Whereas if you're a plant, you basically are stuck in one place, and you better be able to adapt to being there all the time. Okay? So your cells are going to look different. You're going to have to compete with other plants for things like water and sunlight and stuff like that, so your cells look different. Okay, big word. Chemoheterotroph. Chemoheterotrophs are any organisms that have to use other organisms for food. Okay? So, chemoheterotroph means this: chemical other feeder. Okay? Chemical other feeder. So we're using the chemicals from other organisms as food. Okay? Chemoheterotroph. Okay, just remember, a trough is what you feed out of. Okay. All right, so for all chemoheterotrophs, their cells contain lysosomes. That is, membrane-enclosed organelles that contain digestive enzymes. Okay, what does an earthworm eat? It's a chemoheterotroph because it's an animal, but what does it eat? Nobody wants to say it. It eats dirt. Okay? Is there organic material in dirt? Yes, there is. Okay? There's all kinds of organic material. Okay? Earthworms are really part of the decomposers. Okay? They help to break down stuff that's in the soil. Okay? And that's what they eat. Okay? They're still consuming organic material that was once part of another organism. Okay? They just don't have to hunt it. Okay? Fungi, we already talked about. You can have decomposing fungi like these, okay, that are just going to break down humus, that's organic material on the ground, okay, help it to break down more quickly. They get energy from that. Or you could be a big carnivorous organism like a great white shark. Right? In any one of those cases, digestive enzymes are being used to break down organic material. Anybody need that one anymore? All right, so in an animal cell, okay, their mode of nutrition is that they are a chemoheterotroph. And because of that, their cells have to be somewhat plastic. Okay, so animal cells have to be somewhat plastic. That means able to change shape because they're mobile. Okay, now a fungus is the opposite. Okay, a fungus actually doesn't have really flexible cells. A fungus actually has cells that have cell walls like a plant. That's why fungi were classified as plants for so long. Okay, they grew out of the ground and they had cell walls. It didn't matter that they didn't carry out photosynthesis. They grew in the ground and had cell walls, so they were a plant. Okay, but in actual fact, metabolically, they're closer to animals. Okay, so they wouldn't have that, but animal cells have to be plastic. Okay, they have to be flexible. Their cells have to be able to move and stretch and twist and whatever without rupturing. Okay, so they have to have an internal cytoskeleton. That's these kind of fibrous things that go through the cell and attach to different sides of it and keep it from stretching too far and ripping. Okay, and that's due to needs for mobility. Okay, so animal cells often contain those fibrous materials that allow them to change shape. Okay, animal cells also have only a flexible outer membrane. There's no cell wall. Okay, animal cells do not have a cell wall. If animal cells had a cell wall, we'd all be walking around like we were in Minecraft. Okay, everybody would be all blocky and square. Okay. I assume that's right. I don't know. I see my kid playing Minecraft and everything's all blocks. I've never played it myself, but I look at it and go, man, the graphics were better on games when I was a kid. How can we play this? Whatever. Thanks for nobody pointing out that that was a really, really long time ago when I was a kid. All right. Other mode of nutrition. Okay, the other mode of nutrition is photoautotrough. Okay, so we had chemoheterotroph, chemical other feeder. Photo means light. Auto means self. Troph, feeder. So light self-feeding. Right? These organisms are photosynthetic. But they fall under photoautotrophs. Right, so plant cells produce their own food by capturing sunlight and using its power to remove carbon from CO2 to produce sugar for energy by photosynthesis. Okay, those are photoautotrophs. Okay, and we were talking about the carbon cycle just a few minutes ago. Okay, that's what this is right here. Okay, you got you know, animals and fungi and insects and whatever, all producing carbon dioxide and water as a waste product, which is the raw materials for photosynthesis. So you always have, okay, one group producing the raw material for the other. Okay. Questions there? So photoautotrough means light, self-feeding. These are photosynthetic organisms. Now, if you are a plant, you are rooted to one location for life. Okay? This is the Lord of the Rings. You're not an ant. You can't just pick up and walk away when things get bad. Okay? You have to stay where you are. What kinds of things do plants need to survive? Water, sunlight, what else do they need? They get it from the dirt. Nutrients, yeah. Nutrients and stuff that are in the soil. They got those three things they got to have, and carbon dioxide, right? You can't carry out photosynthesis without carbon dioxide. Luckily, carbon dioxide is plentiful everywhere, and it's not really something plants have to compete for. But plants do have to compete for those other materials, water and sunlight especially, right? So how do plants compete? Like, there's no plant Olympics, like, there's not sports or something like that, but they compete still. They compete for survival.
With like the size of their roots and stuff?
Yeah, how deep your roots go or how spread out they are, okay, is certainly a way that you can compete for water. How do they compete for light?
They grow taller.
Yeah, they grow taller or wider, okay? They shade out their competition, okay? It's savage, okay? Plant competition is savage. You get in the shade and you don't do well, all right? If you're in the bright sun and you got big, wide leaves, you're gonna do just fine, okay? So there is competition there for that. So in order to compete for light, plants have to have the ability to get tall. Okay, so plants are much different in terms of their cellular structure. They first off have to have an organelle, okay? Organelle is part of a cell that can carry out photosynthesis because that's how they get their glucose. That's chloroplasts, okay? So chloroplasts are going to be part, okay, of any plant cell. Okay? Inside the chloroplast is where chlorophyll is. It's obviously where photosynthesis takes place. Okay? Plants need to be able to support their growth. And plants don't have bones. Okay? Obviously, like for lots of animals, we support our growth and mass with bones. Okay? But plants don't have bones. All right? So, how do plants support their growth? A couple of different ways. Right? They can cement their cell walls together with a compound called lignin. That's what like wood is. Okay, so if you cut down a tree, okay, the hard stuff that makes the wood part of the tree, okay, is essentially a whole bunch of cell walls cemented together with this lignin. Okay, do all plants make that kind of material? No, some plants are just green. Okay, if the plants are just green and they don't have like a woody stem, okay, then they support their weight with the cell walls and water vacuoles, this big balloon full of water that's in the middle of the cell. Okay? What that essentially does is creates pressure from the inside that pushes against the cell wall and keeps the cell wall upright. Okay? The water vacuole and the cell wall alone cannot support the plant. If either one of those fails, the plant wilts, okay, or will just become limp. If the water vacuole is full, it can push against the cell wall, and the cell wall can hold up the cell. Okay, so the cell wall is not this like impenetrable wall, because we say wall and we imagine like what's at the back of the room. Okay, the cell wall is not like that. Cell wall is like a house that's being built. It's just been framed. You can walk through the walls. Okay, they're not solid yet. Right? They're just a frame. That's what the cell wall is. It's just a frame that goes on the outside. Okay? Anything can get through it. So wall is really a bad name for it. It's really more the cell frame. Okay? But we call it the cell wall. Okay? And so it's supportive. If either one of those isn't there, then like a plant that doesn't have the ability to make the wood-like material, okay, is going to just be green and it will wilt if it doesn't get enough water. Everyone's seen what a plant looks like when it wilts, right? Okay. Can you rescue a plant after it's wilted? If it's not crunchy, it'll usually come back. Okay, once a plant gets crunchy, it's a little too far gone. Okay, but if it's just starting to wilt a little bit, it just needs a little water. When you give it water, the water vacuoles will fill back up. They'll become firm again, and they'll push against the cell walls, and the plant will right itself. Okay? In fact, I've got this sheerly by luck one day. This is actually part of a lab we're going to do later. I wanted to do a time lapse of this lab to show the water going into the leaf, but it didn't work. But here's what did work. This plant right here, okay, you see how kind of limp it looks right now? I hadn't watered it for a long time. I kind of forgot about it, and I hadn't watered it, so it was all limp. But watch what happens to it. I watered it, and watch what happens to it over the course of a couple of days. You can actually see it come back, okay, over the course of this video. Margarita, can I just get you to turn off the lights so we can see it a little bit better? Just the front one will be good, because I'm afraid of the dark. Okay, so that plant will come closer here in just a second. There we go. All right, so see these leaves here? See how they're starting to perk up? There, look. Okay. That's not growth. It's dark. That's not going to grow in the dark. Okay? But this is actually just the water vacuoles filling back up so that the plant can be taller and more firm. Okay? It would easily shade out its competition. You can see all these leaves here are really starting to fill back up. That's just one of those happy accidents, because this part didn't work at all. Okay, so that's kind of the role that plays. Okay, Margaret, I get you to turn that back on, please. All right, yeah, so the plant cell has to have this different structure because it's got to support, okay, growth that allows it to get taller or more full, okay, to capture as much sunlight as possible. When those leaves are curled and limp like that, it's actually kind of a survival tactic. The leaf turns downwards, and it doesn't get as much sun, which reduces the amount of water the plant can lose. Okay? When the plant's got plenty of water, the leaves are back flat again, okay, where they're going to capture more sunlight and carry out more photosynthesis. The more photosynthesis the plant carries out, the more water it needs to do it. Okay? So it kind of helps if when it's not got very much water, the leaves are kind of facing away from the sun a little bit more. All right? So those are all kind of adaptations of each cell, okay, that the plant uses that are different from an animal cell. Okay, so plant and animal cells have lots of similarities, more than they have differences. Okay, those come in the areas of intracellular transport and waste excretion. Okay, those are the similarities. Okay, so from an evolutionary point of view, what might this mean? Well, it means, and we talked about this the other day, that they have a common ancestor. Okay, both plant and animals evolved from a common ancestor way, way back, like 3.5 billion years ago. Okay, they would have shared a single cell common ancestor. Right. All right, so if we're just looking at the two plants, okay, we can see the two cells, not the two plants. Okay, that they both have a lot of similar structures, right? They both have a nucleus, okay, and that's the big thing in the middle, right? They both have a nucleolus, which is the small little kind of ball in the middle of the nucleus. Okay, they've got rough ER and smooth ER, that's this pink stuff. Okay, they've got Golgi apparatus, that would be right here in that one. Okay, they both have mitochondria, that's there. Okay, they both have cytoplasm, that's the fluid that fills up the cell. Okay, but again, there's those differences. The cell wall, not having a cell wall. Okay, having lysosomes, that would be these things here. Okay, versus not having any lysosomes because there's no need. Right, things like that. Okay, everybody's good with that? All right, here's what I want you guys to do. These 5 questions here, I want you guys to write some answers for them, complete sentences in your notes. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do that, and then we'll go over them. While you're doing that, I'm going to hand out your cell diagrams, and when we're done those questions, we're going to label our cell diagrams. Okay? All right, let's go over these. So question number 1, essentially a 3-word answer. What are there differences between plant and animal cells?
Because like they can change shapes, or like they're plastic.
Okay, that's one of the differences. What's the reason for it?
They're modes of nutrition.
Modes of nutrition. 3-word answer. Okay, modes of nutrition is why their cells are different. How they get their glucose is different, so they have to be structurally different to adapt for that. Okay, question number 2. What organelle supplies plants with energy?
Nutrients, the sun, water, and carbon dioxide.
Nope, I'm looking for which
Wait,
organelle, which part of the cell.
Okay.
The chloroplasts using photosynthesis. Okay, so chloroplasts are the organelle that carries out photosynthesis. That's what supplies the cell, the plant, with its glucose. Okay, what organelle supplies animal cells with energy? Lysosome, yeah, it's the one that digests the food and turns it into glucose. Okay, from there, everything else is the same. That glucose goes to the mitochondria. The mitochondria is where cellular respiration occurs. That is the breakdown of glucose using oxygen into carbon dioxide and water. Right? So the mitochondria is the next step after either the chloroplast or the lysosome. All right, number 4, transport within plant and animal cells is done in the same fashion. Why would this have been kept the same, evolutionarily speaking, when so many other things have been altered?
It has nothing to do with the modes of nutrition, so it's able to be kept the same.
Okay, that is true. It has nothing to do with the modes of nutrition, so it wouldn't change. Why else wouldn't it change? Think about how the process of evolution happens.
Nothing has come up that they need to adapt to anything differently.
Yeah, it still works. Okay, nothing better has come along. That's how natural selection causes evolution. Okay, now remember, those are 2 separate processes, right? One is the mechanism for the other. That is, natural selection is the mechanism by which evolution occurs. So natural selection works like this. One plant is able to grow twice as fast as another plant. That plant is going to survive and reproduce more often than the plant that grows half as fast. Okay? As a result, over the course of the next, let's say, 2,000 years, more of the genes from the fast-growing plant will end up in the population, and pretty soon the slow-growing genes will be eliminated. Okay? And that will have caused a change in the species, okay, resulting in evolution. Okay? So natural selection chooses a single trait as better, okay, or more suited to the environment. Evolution is the process of that trait becoming more and more common or dominant in the population and soon phasing out what was there before. All right, does everyone kind of follow me on that? Okay, so it's kept the same because nothing better has come along. Okay, if something better comes along, natural selection will select it, and over the course of a very long time, it will become the dominant or only way that things are done. Okay, and then number 5, the nutritional needs of plants and animals are very different. Which would have survived best in a primordial earth that had very little oxygen or organic material available? Okay, so Earth is very young. Its atmosphere is mostly carbon dioxide. Sunlight is plentiful, right? But there's virtually nothing to eat. What's going to do well?
Plant?
Yeah, anything photosynthetic. The first organisms, okay, were either chemosynthetic or photosynthetic. Okay, they had to be able to produce their own food. There was nothing to eat. Okay, so photosynthesis became the dominant one. We still have a few chemosynthetic organisms. Those are the ones that live by the volcanic vents. Okay, they use the heat from the volcanic vents to actually synthesize their food molecules. Okay, but that's a very rare form. What we mostly have, okay, is photosynthesis, light being used to make sugar. All right, questions on any of those? Okay. Then, I'm going to give you guys about a 5-minute break here. Let's come back at 9:35. If you're leaving the classroom, be quiet in the hallways, please. Okay, back here 9:35, and we're going to label ourselves. Okay. All right, so we'll start with the plant cell, and we'll start up here at the top. Okay, so this big purple thing that's in the middle is the nucleus. Okay, now you've probably been taught by some very well-meaning person that the nucleus is the brain of the cell. I hate that. It's not a brain. The brain is made of many neurons, makes decisions and fires impulses, and the nucleus doesn't do any of that crap. Okay? A nucleus contains the DNA of the cell. The DNA is instructions for how to build anything or do anything that the cell requires. But no active decision making is made by the nucleus. Therefore, if you write brain of the cell, I will give you 0 on the whole thing. So don't write brain of the cell, okay? That's like a grade 5 answer, okay? It is not good enough here. What does the nucleus do? It stores DNA. Okay? That's what it does. Okay? It stores DNA. If anything, it's the library of the cell, not the brain, right? But on a quiz or a test, I would want you to probably say for its function, okay, that it stores DNA. That's really what its job is, right? Now, the smaller, darker dot inside of the nucleus is the what? It is not. I hate that answer too. Okay, now this is the nucleolus. Now, I'm not too big on spelling for most of the organelles. If you're close, I'm happy with that. But these two, you have to spell right because they're so close to each other, both in spelling and anatomically, right? They are definitely two different structures. Now, the nucleolus is more like a brain, but isn't a brain, okay? The nucleolus copies parts of your DNA. And by doing so, it essentially controls the synthesis of proteins within the cell. And we were talking about how vaccination works, and how the DNA goes in there, and the DNA codes for things. Okay? Well, the nucleolus is like the librarian. Okay? It knows where all the information is, and it can sign it out to you so you can learn something or do something with it. Okay? So the nucleolus will find the parts of the DNA that are needed, make copies of those, and send the copies out into the cell where the proteins can be manufactured. Right? All of that is going to be in your notes from lesson 5, so you don't need to be scrambling to write it all down, okay? Unless you want to write something like really quick. Okay? So like nucleus stores DNA. Nucleolus copies DNA or controls protein synthesis. Like just a quick and dirty definition. Okay? So that's what the nucleolus does. All right? Now, the nucleus has a special membrane around it. Oddly enough, it is known as the nuclear membrane. Okay? The nuclear membrane works differently than most other membranes. Nothing gets through it, except through these holes, okay? Called nuclear pores. The nuclear pores are where the DNA that the nucleolus copies goes in and out. Okay? But stuff can't go actually through the membrane itself, like it can through the cell membrane or membranes of other organelles. Okay? The nuclear membrane is in fact like a border. Okay? It's walled off. Okay? Even though the wall never got built, but it gets walled off. Okay? You can only get through certain points that are like tightly guarded. Right? That's kind of what the nuclear membrane is like. Right? So the nuclear membrane ensures that only DNA can get in and out of the nucleus. Okay, this dot right here, I'll make sure this is my new, yeah, okay. So this dot right here, it looks like it's like pointing at nothing, and it would kind of be like the empty part of the cell, okay? But it's not empty, the cell is obviously filled with fluid. If the cell was filled with air, all of the organelles would fall to the bottom and pile up on top of each other, okay? So the cell is filled with a fluid called cytoplasm. Okay? So that arrow or point could go to any part of the cell that appears empty, okay? Because that part of the cell would be filled with cytoplasm.
Okay, what would this be like? My grade 8 teacher was like really emphasizing the Ghostbusters part of it, like when you shoot them, you know, they blow up green.
That's ectoplasm.
Yeah, but he said cytoplasm is pretty much the exact same thing, just for plants.
He was really, really wrong. Sorry, I can't think of a nicer way to say that, so that's the way I'm going to say it.
No, I was just wondering.
Yeah. No. It's cytoplasm is actually clear. It might be, and it's not like gelatinous either. It's slightly thicker than water, but not like super thick. Okay. All the reason that cytoplasm is there is to help facilitate transport within the cell. Materials need a fluid so that they can diffuse through the cell. We haven't even talked about cellular transport yet, but that's why cytoplasm is there. Okay? Diffusion wouldn't work nearly as well if the cell was full of air. Okay? So it's full of a fluid, okay, called cytoplasm that basically helps transport occur. Okay. The next thing is this orange stuff with the little blue dots on it. Okay? You usually find this stuff very close or surrounding the nucleus, but you can find it in other places in the cell, but the bulk of it is close to the nucleus. Okay? This stuff is rough endoplasmic reticulum, which you can abbreviate ER, but I'm running out of room. Okay, so you can just call this rough ER. Reticulum. On a quiz or a test, you can just write rough ER. Okay, I'm good with that. The rough endoplasmic reticulum basically transports protein. Okay? The little dots that are all over it are the part of the cell that makes protein. Okay? And so it's natural that this stuff would transport the proteins that they would produce. Okay. Our next little line here goes to the little dots that are all over the rough ER. It's what actually makes the rough ER rough. Okay, is the fact that it's got these things all over it, and it actually looks rough under an electron microscope. Okay, these things are called ribosomes. Very simply, ribosomes make protein. A more complex explanation, they take the DNA that the nucleolus copied, they read it, and assemble the protein out of the amino acids that are hanging around inside the cell. Okay? I would be fine with you saying makes protein on a quiz or test. Okay? All right, our next arrow is pointing at this stuff, which you can see looks a lot like the rough ER, but doesn't have the ribosomes on it. So by comparison, it would be not rough, but smooth. Okay, so this is the smooth endoplasmic reticulum, which we'll just call ER. This diagram doesn't do a great job of showing how much smooth ER there is, but there's a lot of it. Okay, it's just they can't really show it on any diagram how much of it there is, or they wouldn't be able to show you any other parts of the cell. Okay, there's a lot of smooth ER in the cell, and that's because the smooth ER has more jobs than any other organelle in the cell. Okay, and those jobs are crucial. Smooth ER makes lipids. Okay? Lipids are fats. Fats are used to make membranes. Okay? All of the membranes in your cell, on your cell, anywhere, okay, they're all made of lipids. Okay? So being able to make lots of lipids is important because membranes are always needing repair. Okay? So this stuff helps to build and repair membranes by making lipids. Right? It also helps to transport, okay, materials. It helps to break down complex carbohydrates. Right? So if you had, you know, a bunch of pasta, for example, okay, or a bunch of rice, something really starchy, okay, this would help to break that stuff down. We don't need really complex digestive enzymes like are in the lysosome for that, okay, because they're already very close to glucose. Okay, your lysosome is mostly breaking down like proteins and stuff that's more complex. Okay, so the Smooth ER does that, and the Smooth ER also detoxifies any poisons that might be in your cell. Okay, so if you were to, you know, let's say consume some alcohol, the alcohol would be broken down by the Smooth ER of your cell. So your liver would have lots of Smooth ER in all of its cells because that's the job of your liver.
So if you get like any of those liver things from having too much alcohol, does that mean those are dying or something?
Well, it means the cells in your liver are dying.
Okay.
Like the cells are in the liver are designed to break down toxins. But if you're constantly making them do that, they wear out. It's just like anything else.
Yeah.
Okay, next structure is this yellow thing. This is the Golgi apparatus. The job of the Golgi apparatus is to get rid of waste. It also helps to export export hormones. Okay, because your cell can make different hormones, and the Golgi apparatus can help to excrete those out of the cell. So basically, anything that needs to get out of the cell goes through the Golgi apparatus. It's the garbage man of the cell. Sorry, sanitation technician of the cell. There's a politically correct name for everything. All right, this blue thing. Anyone know what it is? It is the mitochondria. Which you've probably been told is the powerhouse of the cell. Okay? Well, that's a good grade 5 explanation of what it does. It carries out cellular respiration is a more technical high school description of what it does. So please don't write powerhouse of the cell on a quiz. I'm going to go grade 5, yes, grade 10, no on that one. Okay? You need to say performs or carries out cellular respiration. Or breaks down glucose for energy or something along those lines. Okay? Okay. Next line here is this one, and it is pointing at the layer inside of the green layer. So there's the green layer on the outside, and then there's this kind of faded orange layer just inside of it. That faded orange layer is the cell membrane. Okay? Plant cells still have a cell membrane, okay? Just like animal cells do. The cell membrane's job is to control endocytosis and exocytosis. In other words, what gets in or out of the cell. That is controlled by the cell membrane, okay? Not by the cell wall. Right? In this course, I'm going to need to see those two words, endocytosis and exocytosis, which we'll talk about tomorrow. Okay? Those are the technical names for movement into endocytosis and exocytosis out of the cell. All right. The outer layer, the green layer, this is the cell wall. It does not protect the cell. I know that somebody along the way taught you that as well. Okay? If you go to a house that's just been framed, those walls don't protect that house from anything. Okay? You can walk right through them, okay? And that's what the cell wall is. It's just a frame. All it does is help keep the cell's shape. Okay, so if you're looking for a function, you could say frame of the cell, keeps the cell's shape, okay, helps to support the cell, okay, or something along those lines. But it does not in any way, shape, or form protect the cell from anything. All right, what's the green thing?
Chloroplast.
That's a chloroplast. One word for the function of the chloroplast.
Photosynthesis.
No, I didn't. I erased that. Okay, the chloroplast carries out photosynthesis. All right, the big blue thing up here, and I know I've skipped this line, but I'll come back to it. Okay, the big blue thing up here, this is the water vacuole. Okay, and it also supports the cell and keeps its shape. It just does it from the inside, where the cell wall does it from the outside. Okay. To do that, it uses turgor pressure, which is the pressure of water pushing against the inside of the cell. Okay, so you probably want to use that word turgor pressure, but it's in your notes for tomorrow. Okay, that's how it pushes everything against the cell wall. Okay, making it firm. Right now, the outside of the water vacuole has a special type of membrane called a tonoplast. And that's what this line is pointing at. Right, is the special membrane that surrounds the water vacuole. Okay, that's everything in the plant cell. Now here's the good news. Are a lot of those structures in the animal cell?
Yes.
Do they look exactly the same in the animal cell?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, they do. Okay, so like people get all uptight and they're like, oh, I'm gonna have to memorize 2 different kinds of cells. Well, yes, that's true, but remember that like 3/4 of the structures are shared. Okay, so you're not really having to memorize 2 cells worth of different stuff. Okay, there's like 4 things that are different between plant and animal cells, and everything else is the same. All right, so for our animal cell, okay, starting out here again, what's this big purple thing? Ah! Okay, it's the nucleus, okay, which stores DNA. Right? I don't know why I don't have an arrow going to the nucleolus. Probably should. Let's maybe put one right here. So you got to add that one. Just that one. Okay. Okay. Nucleolus. That's the one that copies the DNA and helps to regulate protein synthesis and so on. Right, and then obviously the outside of the nucleus is still the nuclear membrane. I don't have a line for that one either on this one, but it's doubled up. So, okay. All right, this one here pointing at the space within the cell, which we call the cytoplasm. Okay, it's like a fluid. Okay, the fluid that enables diffusion, which is intracellular transport, to occur. All right. These yellow structures are the next one, and they are new. They're not in plant cells. They're only in animal cells, and we haven't talked about them yet. Right? These are the centrioles. They actually have nothing to do with nutrition, but they're only present in animal cells for this reason. They help with cell division. When a cell divides, we said one of the first things it does is copy all of its DNA, so that both of the daughter cells will have all of the possible DNA. Well, when a cell is dividing, in the middle of the division process, all of the DNA lines up right across the middle of the cell, called the metaphase plate. Okay? And what happens is these centrioles will migrate to the poles of each cell. And they'll put out these fibers that grab onto each chromosome. making sure that both cells, when the cell divides, will pull the chromosomes to the right side of the cell. Okay? The reason animal cells have to do that is because they are flexible and they can change shape while they're dividing. And if that happens, if there's a twisting or something like that that happens, some of the DNA might not get to the right place if it's just getting there on its own. All right? So the centrioles help to make sure that the DNA is pulled in the right direction. Plant cells don't need that because their shape is rigid and they're not going to change shape significantly during a cell division, so they don't require the use of centrioles. Does that sort of make sense? All you have to write is centrioles help with cell division. That's the more technical explanation of what they do. Okay. All right, what's this stuff?
Rough ER.
That's the rough ER. Okay, rough ER, same job, transports proteins. All right, what are the little dots? Ribosomes. They make protein. Okay, what's the blue thing? Mitochondria, which carry out cellular respiration, break down sugar for energy. All right, that little blue egg-looking thing, that's new. Wasn't in any of the other ones. What's one of the organelles animal cells need that plant cells don't? Lysosomes. Yeah. Okay, so this is a lysosome. Okay, so inside of that would be food and digestive enzymes. Okay, so the process of digestion would be going on inside of that. Okay, what's this part? This is the cell membrane. Okay, which controls, 2 words, endocytosis and exocytosis. Okay, there's a lot to memorize in this unit, right? Especially when it comes to labeling the cell. All right, this little red structure, we haven't talked about these yet, but it's like the lysosome. Okay, the Golgi apparatus, this one here, actually makes the digestive enzymes that end up in a lysosome. Okay, but they end up in a vesicle like this before they encounter food. A vesicle that contains digestive enzymes and food, and digestion is taking place, is a lysosome. A vesicle that only contains the enzymes and has no food in it is a peroxisome. So it's like a precursor to a lysosome. It's an empty stomach. Sorry, and that's an M. Right, my penmanship is terrible. Okay, and then obviously the yellow thing is still the Golgi apparatus, which gets rid of wastes.
In an animal cell, what would it be getting rid of though?
Well, there's lots of metabolic wastes that are going to be present that are toxic, lactic acid, stuff like that. Okay, that would need to be excreted from the cell. When toxins are broken down, they need to be excreted and gotten rid of. Okay, all right. So tomorrow's Thursday. You're going to have a quiz, and it'll be mostly on cell theory and modes of nutrition. I'm not going to make you do this yet, because I haven't gone over in detail what every part of the cell does. Okay, so your quiz tomorrow will be on modes of nutrition and cell theory. You won't have to label a cell on tomorrow's quiz.
What would you test on for like modes of nutrition?
Like terminology, what's a chemoheterotroph, photoautotrough, what organelle, chloroplast is going to be present. It's not going to make you label. So basically everything that was in the lesson before we got to labeling, that's gained for tomorrow and lesson 1 on cell theory. Okay?